tensions rise once again on the Israel-Gaza border with 1 week until the temporary ceasefire is due to end. Hamas authorities in the Gaza Strip claim they have arrested the militants who launched a mortar at southern Israel on Tuesday evening. A bit more than 24 hours left until Scotland's independence referendum results are revealed, and as polls show, it's too close to call. Both sides hold rallies to make a final push to win over undecided voters. And amid much debate on the American strategy against the Islamic State, U.S. President Barack Obama makes a statement and makes clear U.S. combat troops will not return to Iraq.
The News Today with Lucy Aharish.
Good evening. 1 week before the temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is set to expire, it seems an uneasy tension has returned to the border. Last night, residents of southern Israel had an all too familiar experience with a mortar fired from the Gaza Strip towards their homes. Hamas has since reportedly arrested someone for the event. The Israeli Prime Minister said a short while ago that Hamas knows full well Israel will not tolerate a drizzle of rocket and mortar fire from Gaza. Hamas leader Mahmoud Zahar told the Arab media that the organization will never agree to demilitarization and that Hamas can win the public's vote in the West Bank. And tonight we will go to our correspondents on the Gaza border, back again, Shahar Peled, Lea Bardugo, and Sami Abu Diab. And before we will start talking about what is going on, let's take a look back.
حديث الاحتلال عن إطلاق قذيفة هاون من قطاع غزة ليس هناك أي معلومات تشير إلى تأكيد وقوع هذا الأمر.
Back again to the same story, and with me on set tonight is Aviv Bushinsky, former media advisor and chief of staff to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Good evening.
Hi, good
Thank
evening.
you very much for coming. And also Avi Melamed, intelligence analyst and fellow at the Eisenhower Institute. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. So, how come Hamas was in a hurry to go out and say it's not us? It wasn't us. It was someone else.
Because Hamas now is in a stage that he has to start to internalize the severe outcome of the recent military campaign that he was involved in. There are right now major rifts within Hamas already, and I'm talking about the senior leadership of Hamas, because mostly of the outcome of the recent military round. Hamas actually look around, he see the destruction in Gaza, he see the reactions in the Arab world, he sees the inside rifts within Hamas, and Hamas today, as I always say, he entered this military round from a very deep crisis, and he exit this round in an even severe situation. And Hamas is today doing a lot of efforts trying to somehow stabilize something inside the Gaza Strip. So as of now, it seems like Hamas' ultimate interest is to trying to stabilize things in the Gaza Strip. That's the reason why Hamas is trying very hard to make clear that he is not reinitiating the fire, because in the current atmosphere in the Gaza Strip, among the Palestinians and in the Arab world, that will be a fatal mistake to do.
So Benjamin Netanyahu is saying that we are not going to stay still for any firing from the Gaza Strip. On the other hand, we see that Israel, in one way or another, kept Hamas controlling the Gaza Strip because it suits Israel. So what should Israel do right now?
First of all, I don't know if it suits Israel. We all remember that Netanyahu said prior the elections that he will dismantle the Hamas. Then when he didn't do so, some said, yeah, it's okay because it is within our interest, because you don't know what worse can come, maybe Daesh or others. So it's a good excuse for Hamas existence. It's true, as you defined it, the drizzling, the small incident as we had today is not sufficient enough for Netanyahu to attack Gaza, I assume, because he wants to show that the protective edge operation did achieve something. So here it doesn't want the situation to deteriorate, and he keeps still. And I think that also, if we won't resume or we won't have any real negotiations with the Hamas or bypass the Hamas to solve the issue, including demilitarization and other things that they talked about, Netanyahu will not say, okay, it's enough, you go back and fire and try to
I
do
think
something
anyone
aggressive.
from this government or from the military officials really thought that there will be no more rocket firing from the Gaza Strip towards Israel?
I think that no one in Israel thinks that this is the end of the story. Maybe it's we're all waiting for the next cycle, and I am afraid that it's true that the Hamas was hit severely and has to recover right now. But part of its recovery is also to rearm themselves, maybe build new tunnels. So we all expect the new phase, maybe not on Rosh Hashanah, but it will take time. We didn't finish the job there, unfortunately. And one more thing, now they talk about intelligence and things like that. Maybe we'll discuss it further on. Nobody knows what's going up in the north. Do they or don't they dig tunnels in order to hit or attack Israel?
Like nobody knew about what is going on in the south?
It's a good question.
So, as we discussed before, we'll continue discussing this matter. As we discuss, I-24 News correspondent Ayman Siksik follows the inner conflict between the Palestinian factions.
Fears of another breached ceasefire spread in Israel Tuesday as a mortar fired from the Gaza Strip landed in the country. Israeli security officials said Wednesday that Hamas acted promptly to capture those responsible for firing the mortar. But residents of the communities surrounding the Gaza border are taking the statements with a grain of salt.
Right now, things are still quiet. Hamas claims the mortar was an accident, but we are still vigilant. We're waiting for change. There's nothing else we can do.
Hamas co-founder Mahmoud al-Zahar said to the Lebanese media Tuesday that the organization will not bow to political negotiations made by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas with Israel. According to al-Zahar, Mahmoud Abbas does not represent Hamas in territorial negotiations with Israel. Abbas's authority extends only to ensuring humanitarian aid for Gaza. Al-Zahar said also that Hamas is prepared for elections in Gaza and the West Bank against Mahmoud Abbas, and Hamas is unwilling to negotiate with Israel directly and is completely opposed to its demilitarization. This is a crucial time for Hamas to assert its authority. As Qatar continues to deny the expulsion of Khalid Mash'al, the organization's exiled chief of political bureau, Hamas is pressed to affirm its legitimacy. One question, though, arises from al-Zahar's statements. What does this mean for Abbas's political influence, as Hamas refuses him as a representative and his talks with Israel are at a standstill? It's unclear whether the current truce will evolve into a long-term peace settlement.
Long-term peace settlement is something that I think that it's a wishful thinking. But
Don't
today,
hold your breath.
just stay when you are seated and not standing. Today we heard that Qatar is making voices, and these voices are, let's say, put it in a cautious way to take Khalid Mash'al out of the game in one way or another, to take the Muslim Brotherhoods out of the game in one way or another by expelling them from Qatar. What happened?
We talked a lot about Qatar. I like Qatar. Qatar is playing the game. They are taking care of the Qataris' interests. And I said a couple of times, it has a bad thing and a good thing. The good thing, let's start with the bad thing. The bad thing is Qatar today supports the bad guys. So it supports Hamas, it provides funds to Daesh, it's involved in other things, Jabhat al-Nusra in Syria and so forth. The good thing that it could change tomorrow morning. So if Qatar has decided that this proxies do not serve any longer Qatar's interest, well, it's about time to dump them to the garbage. Now, today Qatar, because of the development in the region, mostly because of the context of what's going on right now in the Gulf state, there is a lot of pressure, there is a lot of discontent. Also, by the way, Qatar is more and more tuned to the messages coming from the international community. Qatar decided that at this point, in order to alleviate a little bit the pressure, they will throw some cards. The cards they could throw, starting with the Muslim Brotherhood. It's relatively easy. Hamas people in Qatar, to the best of my knowledge, are still not deported, but I think that they have been asked politely to pay.
This is another hit for Hamas. This is another big hit for Hamas if Hamas is deciding to take them out of the game. And you've been talking about interest. Is it also because we heard Israel putting Qatar on the, let's say, on the target and saying that Qatar is maybe like the new Iran? So maybe it's also voices that Qatar is hearing from Israel when it knows that maybe it will need Israel something else?
If I was asked to provide Mr. Mash'al an advice, I would say to him, listen, you are working with sponsors that the next day could dump you like nothing. Iran, Qatar, Turkey, they couldn't care less about really Hamas or the Palestinians.
It happened to him in Syria with Assad.
It happens to him in Syria, it happens to him with the Iranians. By the way, up until now, the Iranians are not willing to reconcile as long as Mr. Mash'al is there. Maybe at some point the Iranians will say, you know what, we are willing to do it in our terms, but the Iranians still have times. Why? Because they have alternatives. So going back and talking about Qatar, Hamas, as I said, is today in a very, very, very severe situation because he's not only exiting, not only as the only boss in Gaza Strip, but also he's exiting this round to a totally new environment, and this environment does not provide Hamas friendly conditions to reinitiate fire.
Now I want to take you back to a long time ago, to the White House and to the backyard of the White House, to Camp David. That was signed just today, and 36 years ago. And, you know, we've been talking about a long-term agreement. Can we look at this agreement when we saw Begin and we saw Anwar Sadat standing in the White House and signing on an agreement? Can we see something like that happening here today in 2014 or 16 or 17 or 18 or 19 between Israel or 20 or 30 between Israel and the Palestinian Authority?
I read an interesting column today by Eitan Habel saying that it's a significant day. A country, people that are striving for peace, and today it's the 36th anniversary for the peace treaty, and nobody celebrates, which is awkward. And it is awkward because I think the peace, though they say it's a cold peace, but it's a useful and it was good news for Israel.
Results in the last operation.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think that talking about another peace treaty, our foreign minister says that he'll try to make a peace with not necessarily with the adjacent countries, but maybe other Arab countries. I think it's also something that's a wishful thinking, but no doubt that I don't see in the near future any peace treaty which might be the most important one with the Palestinians for two reasons. One, Netanyahu, I don't think that he's ripened to make concessions with the Palestinians, though many people are hoping that he will. And I think that Abu Mazen and the expert can analyze it better than I do. I think that Abu Mazen is not strong enough to do his concessions in order to reach a peace agreement with Israel.
But you know, when Benjamin Netanyahu is talking about a common ground, and when he's talking about new strategies in the Middle East and about, let's say, moderate
another
powers,
horizon, as he
another
defined it.
horizon and moderate powers to that Israel needs to strengthen in order to go in some other direction. Does he understand that the Palestinians need to be a huge card to go to this horizon that he's talking about?
I think that Netanyahu is strong enough to make a serious step forward with the Palestinians. But on the one hand, I'm talking about public opinion. But on the other hand, I think that Netanyahu doesn't believe that it is possible to make a real peace with the Palestinians, and therefore it is quite stagnant, and I don't see any change in the near future.
So if we're looking at these two leaders, at these two maybe agreements, back then there were some strategies. There was, or maybe not, there weren't any strategies between Israel and Egypt. Maybe it was two leaders that decided that it's about time to do some peace. Today we see a lot of strategies, a lot of interests, a lot of maybe good things that can work both ways. Good for the Palestinians, good for the Israelis, good for the region. So can a peace agreement today maybe be reached only on the basis of interests and not by saying enough is enough?
Look, I'm always saying about Israeli-Palestinian peace treatment that the big question is whether it will last. This is the big test. Today, if such document is going to be signed, it's not going to last for a long time. One of the reasons, Aviv mentioned here the Israeli side, I will talk about the Palestinian side. The Palestinians are still in the midst and in the very early stage of starting an inner discussion among themselves. Where do they want to go as a nation? Where do they want to go in the context of possible peace with Israel? In the sense, for example, what are the things that they are willing to compromise over? What are the red lines? What is their national identity like? Now, the inner split between Palestinian Authority and Hamas is not only about political power, it's about ideology, it's about outlooks, it's about the way they envision this Palestinian entity to be. So obviously it's enormously important to bear it in mind. And then we have to remember, I always say that in the end of the day, Israeli-Palestinian agreement cannot take place detached from external circles in the region. In the end of the day, what will set the conditions, either to positively or negatively, for the ability to obtain Israeli-Palestinian agreement will be the events that will happen in the region, in the external circles. And today, the whole region is in the midst of a huge, I'm saying it's a new chapter in the long book of the Arab society struggling over identity, direction, and path. Today, the Middle East is in this new chapter. We see ISIS, we see the war in Syria, we see the states that some people call them the moderate. It's not a moderate. Saudi Arabia is not moderate. But the states that seeks for stability, and they are all engaged in this battle, conflict over path, direction, and identity. And it radiates the Palestinians, it radiates Israel. And in the end of the day, things that will happen, the course of events that will happen in these external circles, they will play a significant role in impacting the direction, path of the Israeli-Palestinian
talks. And I want to take you just after we will talk with our I-24 News correspondent Shachar Peled, who's standing right now next to the border. I will take you to this division between Hamas and Fatah and where it's going. With us, like I said, Shachar Peled. Shachar, we're just days before the New Year, the Jewish New Year. People just started coming back to their homes, and just yesterday, another rocket was fired from the Gaza Strip. That was the scenario, basically, that the people in the south anticipated.
Well, exactly what the residents here in southern Israel feared. The constant drizzle of mortars, of rockets fired to this area, as they have been suffering for the past 14 years, with the rest of the country continuing with life as usual, trying to continue like nothing happened in the past summer, and almost practically ignoring this latest mortar fired last night to the south of Israel, exploding in an open area, but still causing much concern, much frustration and confusion here in the south. As you mentioned, we are a week ahead of the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. Many families came back to this area but don't intend to stay. Some hope and believe this rocket was a single rocket and won't lead into an escalation. But 17 families from the kibbutz of Nachal Oz, which remember the tragic death of 4-year-old Daniel Tragerman there during the operation. 17 families already announced they are leaving the kibbutz, and as we are ahead of the holidays, usually in these forms of villages in a kibbutz, during the holiday, the entire village, all the families gather together in one dining hall and dine together Right now, one of the organizers said that out of 130 families, only 60 will be here to celebrate the festivities, and the rest don't want to risk their holiday and will be spending the time up in the north, away from their home. They don't want to be here if tensions rise once again, and there will indeed be an escalation.
Yes, Shahal Peled, thank you very, very much for this. Just today we heard, what the people from the south, from the south are saying, that this government doesn't take care of them. This government is not hearing what is happening. It promised something, and it's not keeping its promise. And today we heard that the cabinet ministers are going to be investigated for the way that they behaved during Operation Protective Edge. How can you run an operation? How can you run a country? How can you run a government when no one really trusts you, and you cannot trust anyone that sits on the same table that you're sitting?
I think you raise an important issue here. First of all, I think according to history, when the people, when the citizens lose faith in the government in terms of security, the leader is toppled, is being kicked away. It happened, for instance, in 96 when Netanyahu was elected after the terrorist attacks in Israel. It happened even in 73 after Yom Kippur, that the government didn't forecast what's going to happen. And I think that here what people are starting to realize is that the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister did not give the full picture to the cabinet, and by this they freezed the cabinet members from deciding, because they didn't have any alternatives. And it's not the issue of secret information that was leaked or not.
So why do you have a cabinet if you're not giving it the entire picture?
That's what I guess they realized, and the main issue was those attacking tunnels. And I want to say one more interesting thing, that today I think, as a citizen, I assume that it's the head of the Israeli intelligence, the IDF, briefed today the media, and he said two things. One, that the holiday, the Rosh Hashanah attack, that some people thought that the Hamas is planning a simultaneous attack on the southern villages. He said that it's a false story. And he also said, which was very interesting, that the Israeli intelligence are willing and going to help the West in giving intelligence how to fight ISIS. And I'm asking myself, why didn't we need to put ourselves in this? Pardon me?
In Syria.
In Syria, why do we need to be involved? Is it? Didn't we suffer enough?
Haven't the Jewish people suffered enough? Haven't the Jewish people suffered enough?
No, if you ask him, I don't know. He has his own calculations.
So if we're looking at, like we said, we're looking at this part, like the Benjamin Netanyahu's part, and the government, Mahmoud Abbas is not facing something easier, because inside of his government, he is being criticized for the way that he handled Operation Protective Edge, for the way that he didn't support the people in the Gaza Strip, for the division between Hamas and Fatah. How can he actually go and try to rebuild, or go to the UN General Assembly and right now announce a new country by the name of Palestine?
Let's make the long story short. He is not so relevant any longer. He is in a transitional stage. This is a transitional stage. Things will not be cut, done with, deal in the times of Mahmoud Abbas. It will be much, much, much afterwards. So right now we are talking about a transitional phase.
His son is very active. So.
His son is very active, so are other people in the Palestinian Authority. Dahlan is like making all kind of announcements. We have to understand it. It's not going to happen in the time of Mahmoud Abbas. But again, going back to what I said before, we have to look at things in a wider perspective, and we can't wait with our clock watch, just counting the minutes, because the process must run its course. And the inner process among Palestinians, by the way, among as Israelis as well, has to take its course. And before it will happen, I think the more accurate way to look at it will be not in the context of, how do we sign a peace agreement that will not last, but how do we create a situation when this ongoing crisis situation is being managed wisely.
How do they gain the trust back again? And we today asked Israelis, if we're talking about trust, we asked today Israelis on the streets if they believe Hamas was behind the rocket fire. Let's see what they had to say.
This is something that must be considered, and considered carefully, to consider what is the Israeli interest, because a harsh response is not always the best way to further our own interest.
Hand them over to us. We want to investigate this. We take it very, very seriously. We have an agreement with you guys. If you don't respect the agreement, it's war. So I would like to investigate this myself.
It might be true that they did arrest the person who was launching this rocket, but I think let's wait a couple of days and see the true.
I don't think it's true. I don't think so. And I hope there will be peace. We only want peace. But they are terrorists, yeah. And it didn't come up on its own. It has come from some place.
They're all standing near a recycle site, so we're going to wait to the next cycle.
So if we are waiting for the next cycle, I don't want, believe me, to be here 24/7, but if we will be here 24/7, the next round won't look not even in one way similar to the current one.
I tend to agree. I think that both sides going to learn their lessons, and you see that the whole issue with the budget now is how to increase the budget for security. But I think that also the Hamas, despite its internal problems, will not sit still. And I read all kinds of stories how they are starting to compensate the ones who participated in the war against Israel. So I think that no doubt the next cycle will be much stronger, and the dome might not be the 100% proof protecting Israel.
Hamas should expect what in the next round?
It's going to be tougher, but I want to say something in that context. I just saw the other day, here we started the educational year at schools in Israel. They started as well in the Gaza Strip.
Yes.
And I saw a video from one of these schools. It was very nice. This cute little girl, she was standing there and singing a nice song, and all the students were in the yard. And one of the things I noticed was that there was no formal sign of Hamas. There was the formal flag of the Palestinian Authority, the script, the terminology. There was nothing to say about Hamas, which is very interesting. Look, I'm saying about Hamas all the time. Hamas is a radical organization. It's a dangerous organization. It's not a lunatic. It's not a bunch of lunatics. They know how to dialogue with reality. They, leaving aside all the announcements and so forth, they know what's going on, and I believe they can calculate a way.
Gentlemen, thank you very much
maybe
for being
Abbas
with me.
will go to Gaza for the first time
I don't think
for
so.
Rosh Hashanah. Yeah.
2 minutes and we will be back. Thank you very much. Tensions rise once again on the Israel-Gaza border with 1 week until the temporary ceasefire is due to end. Hamas authorities in Gaza claim they have arrested the militants who launched a mortar to southern Israel on Tuesday. A bit more than 24 hours left until Scotland's independence referendum results are revealed, and as polls show, it's too close to call. Both sides hold rallies to make a final push to win over undecided voters. And amid much debate on the American strategy against the Islamic State, U.S. President Barack Obama makes a statement and makes clear U.S. combat troops will not return to Iraq. Welcome back. In a little more than 24 hours, we will know if Scotland is going to become an independent country. Polls open tomorrow at 6 a.m. GMT, and around 11 p.m. GMT, first results will be announced. In the meantime, both sides of the Scottish referendum campaign have held rallies as they make their final push to win over undecided voters. Independence supporters attended a mass event in the center of Glasgow where they were urged to vote yes. At the same time, pro-UK campaigners gathered nearby to insist the case for independence had not been made. The latest polls suggest the result is too close to call. And right now, joining me from Dundee in Scotland is Morag Hanna. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, hello.
So how do you feel just a night before the big vote?
It's pretty exciting. I mean, we've never had a vote like this before in my lifetime. Obviously, the last time there was any kind of vote on movement of power from Scotland was back in 1979, which is a few years before I was born. So it's pretty momentous. I think a lot of nerves, but mostly just really excited to see everybody get out and vote.
Why is it so important to you that Scotland will be separated from the UK?
For me, it's very much an idealistic sort of thing. I believe very strongly in self-determination, in fair representation, in holding politicians accountable. I feel personally that Westminster right now is not accountable. I think that the voting system is outdated and archaic. It no longer represents the people fairly. And as such, I want to see a system that actually represents its voters. In Scotland, we have a semi-proportional system. It's a mixed member system where we see a certain level of proportionality. So when you vote, you're actually represented in Parliament. And that just doesn't happen except in a few sort of marginal seats in the UK as a whole.
Your parents agree with you on the separation between Scotland and the UK, because it seems that the youngsters are going more for yes and old people are going more for no.
Actually, it's interesting. What we've seen is that the big bank of yes supporters seems to be folk around about my age. So sort of people from about 25 to 35, 40 are fairly positive on an independent Scotland. However, as you say, over 60s, about 70% of them appear to be opposed from polls. But youngsters, sort of teenagers, have been a bit surprising. I think it was expected that they would be very positive, but they've been a lot more circumspect. They're not necessarily as overwhelmingly yes as people might have expected, I think.
Yes, Morag Hanna, we will talk to you again tomorrow and we will see what will happen. Thank you very much for this talk with us.
No problem.
Yes, and we're moving on the eve before the vote. I-24 News reporter Uri Shapira looks back at the long, complicated relationship between England and Scotland that may come to an end tomorrow.
You can't really blame the Scots. After more than 300 years of unity with the English, some of them want to break free. The history of an independent Scotland goes back to the 9th century. Scottish and Picts tribes joined forces to expel the Vikings and establish the Kingdom of Scotland. During the medieval period, the Scots fought several times against England and were usually brutally defeated, but always kept their spirit high. In 1297, led by landowner William Wallace, they finally beat the hated English. This story of boldness against all odds inspired Mel Gibson's acclaimed movie Braveheart.
That they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
In 1707, the Scots and the English were finally united under the Act of Union, a treaty approved by the Scottish Parliament. The Scots joined the Great British Empire, but continued to nurture their own culture. Scottish icons, such as the Scotch whisky, bagpipes, or the Loch Ness myth, spread around the world. The cooperation between the two nations seems to benefit them both, but frustrations bubbled beneath the surface, as can be seen in movies like Danny Boyle's Trainspotting.
It's shite being Scottish! We're the lowest of the low! The scum of the fucking earth! The most wretched, miserable, servile, pathetic trash that was ever shot into civilization!
As opposed to their neighbors from Northern Ireland, who led a long and violent campaign, the Scots remained peaceful even when the British Empire crumbled during the 20th century. Many questions still hang in the air, such as what currency will an independent Scotland use, or what will be the future of the island's oil facilities. On Thursday, the Scots may start a new chapter, and the English, they can yearn for Edinburgh from across the border.
Yes. And amid much debate on the American strategy against IS, speaking to American troops at the headquarters of U.S. Central Command, U.S. President Barack Obama made clear today that U.S. troops would have no combat mission in Iraq.
This is not and will not be America's fight alone. One of the things we've learned over this last decade is America can make a decisive difference. But I want to be clear. The American forces that have been deployed to Iraq do not and will not have a combat mission. They will support Iraqi forces on the ground as they fight for their own country against these terrorists. As your commander-in-chief, I will not commit you and the rest of our armed forces to fighting another ground war in Iraq.
Very clear. While IS is polishing its filmmaking skills and Barack Obama is making some really clear statements, the IS posting yet another well-crafted video. A New York resident was charged of trying to assist the brutal extremist group. More on the US-IS struggle from I-24 News correspondent Elio Gombruk.
Exploding tanks, injured soldiers, intense fighting, fire and chaos. The flames of war coming soon. It sounds like a trailer of the new Hollywood blockbuster, but it is in fact a PR stunt of the most PR-conscious terrorist group around, the Islamic State. Flames of War, the fighting has just begun, is a 52-second video the terror organization posted last Tuesday aimed at deterring American President Barack Obama and U.S. soldiers from their offensive against the militants in Iraq. The highly impressive productions try to simulate what will happen to the American troops if their attack will be intensified. It's a continuation of the already known IS method of terrifying Western leaders and the public. And while IS militants are preparing for retaliatory attacks, it seems their global recruiting strategy is working. A man from Rochester, New York, has been charged with trying to provide material support to Islamic State and attempting to murder U.S. soldiers. 30-year-old Mufid Elfki, U.S.-born and of Yemeni origin, was watched by the FBI, and following the investigation, a federal grand jury handed down a 7-count accusation against him. According to court records, Elfki tried to help 3 people, 2 of whom were cooperating with the FBI, to travel to Syria to fight for Islamic State. Now he might face a maximum sentence of 15 years in prison for supporting IS, and the attempted murder charge can be carried up to a 20-year sentence. And as Washington is still building its anti-IS strategy in the Middle East, it also has to closely follow the expanding of IS support within the U.S.
All right, thank you. Yes, coming soon, and it's not a movie anymore. And we're moving to Iran. Iran nuclear talks are ramping up again. Outgoing EU Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton is meeting with Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif today ahead of fresh official talks tomorrow. Next week, the Iranian president is set to address the UN General Assembly, and the country has stated that no meeting with Obama is scheduled. As the negotiations enter a crunch time, the office of Ayatollah Khamenei mocked them, publishing cartoons of U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry saying, quote, "The military option is still on the table if Tehran wants to relaunch its uranium enrichment program." Yes, making fun. And with me right now to understand a little bit more and where it's standing is Dr. Emily Landau, Director of the Arms Control and Regional Security Program at the INSS. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hi.
So, Dr. Landau, where do the talks stand right now?
Well, when the July 20th deadline was not met, when the sides were not able to reach any agreement by the first deadline that was set by the interim deal, there was a decision to extend negotiations for another 4 months. But then we entered into August, and of course nobody works in August, as September began, and still nothing. And that brought us to the present day. And tomorrow, negotiations are finally supposed to be resumed. So some time was wasted, unfortunately, and there are now 2 months in which the sides are supposed to reach a comprehensive deal, although Wendy Sherman, the chief U.S. negotiator, was just quoted as saying that the sides, not surprisingly, this is my addition, not surprisingly, are far apart on the key issues at stake.
Dr. Landau, the last time that we heard Catherine Ashton saying anything about the talks and anything about Iran, it was not that positive and it was not that optimistic. Something changed, something is going to change, and especially right now with all the, let's say, strategic moves that the Middle East and Iran is maybe trying to take?
Look, the situation is quite dismal. It's hard to believe that in the next 2 months, the P5+1 will achieve vis-a-vis negotiations with Iran what they haven't been able to achieve basically for 11 years. And as you said correctly, there are additional regional dynamics that are complicating the situation even further. When the United States hints, and more than hints, that it's interested in some kind of cooperation with Iran in fighting ISIL, for example, obviously for Iran this translates into weakness at the negotiations table. And these cartoons on the, did you say it was Khamenei's Twitter? I mean, it's just indicative of what Iran is projecting towards the United States. It is mocking the United States. It is not taking the United States seriously, not taking their threat seriously, and all of this is bad news for the negotiation.
Yeah, and I wonder why. Dr. Emily Landau, thank you very, very much for this.
You're welcome. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. In the last week, the Israeli-Lebanese border returned to the headlines. It was sparked when a senior Israeli military official said that Hezbollah could make an attempt to invade the northern border of Israel in a future eruption of violence. I-24 News correspondent Maxime Perez went to the border that could become Israel's next battleground.
UNIFIL peacekeepers have been deployed in southern Lebanon for 36 years on a sensitive mission in a hostile environment. But the game seems to have changed since the last war between Israel and Hezbollah in 2006. Against all expectations, the calm endures, and the UN force is satisfied with the mission.
The main goal of the mission and the main mandate is to monitor the cessation of hostilities, to work in close coordination with the Lebanese army, and to assist them in the south of Lebanon, and to ensure that the south of Lebanon is free of armed elements.
Israel wishes above all else to prevent Hezbollah from rearming following the 2006 war. The Lebanese Shiite organization, which UNIFIL spokesman is careful not to name, has reamassed an impressive arsenal. According to the Israeli army, the weapons are stockpiled in 200 South Lebanon villages. Since the peacekeeping forces were targeted a few years ago, UN representatives are not welcome in the area. So to facilitate contact with the local population, UNIFIL turns to the Lebanese army.
Of course, we do have relations with mayors of Mukhtar in south of Lebanon, and of course 90% of the population is Shia, and of course you have people belonging to Hezbollah or Amal or any other groups, and of course we do relate with them in relation to their activities, to the activities of the missions in these villages.
And these activities are precisely Israel's problem. Over the last few weeks, armed men were identified close to the security fence on the Israel-Lebanon border. Israeli military intelligence fears these incidents portend an impending attack by Hezbollah.
For what we have seen on the ground, there has been no increase or no movement of troops that are not UNIFIL or Lebanese army, and this is something that we are controlling or monitoring on a daily basis. We had, of course, few sporadic incidents.
Every day, UNIFIL sends nearly 400 patrols around South Lebanon and joins forces more and more often with Lebanese armed forces. With a contingent of 12,000 men, the UN force has undoubtedly contributed to keeping the peace on the Israeli border, but whether it will be able to prevent the next war remains to be seen.
Yes, and let's go to China. The Chinese president arrived in India today as the two Asian giants take steps to boost commercial ties. I-24 News correspondent Ayman Siksik has the story.
China's President Xi Jinping arrived on his first official visit to India Wednesday in one of the most high-profile meetings in Asia this year. China is one of India's top trading partners, with bilateral trade currently standing at $65 billion. Ties between the two countries have received a boost under the new Indian government, who has pledged to deepen its ties with China.
There are enough well-grounded reasons for us to believe that the Chinese have an interest in investing in India. Based on that, we are inviting them to come and invest because it helps us to cut down our trade deficit, hopefully.
India and China signed 3 trade and investment pacts shortly after the arrival of the Chinese president. But despite the warm welcome, tension still remains between the two countries over the demarcation of several Himalayan border areas. India has also been hosting Tibetan exiles for years, including their spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama. The tension over the issue was clear in a protest held in Delhi by Tibetan activists ahead of Xi Jinping's visit.
We want freedom in Tibet. Xi Jinping, you must talk with the Dalai Lama. You are a liar. We want our freedom back. Xi Jinping, stop the occupation. We want our freedom. Free Tibet!
Disputes between the two countries over the border have been ongoing sporadically since 1962. India has troops stationed at Chumar, a remote corner of the western Himalayas. Last week, 200 Chinese soldiers entered what India considers its territory, but were warded off by India's troops. And as the leaders of the two countries meet in India for the first time, there is both hope and anxiety over their future relations.
Yes, and with me right now from India on the line is R.K. Krishna, writer and editor at The Hindu. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening.
So what is the importance of this visit of the Chinese president to India?
I think it is multidimensional. There is a huge economic relationship that is going to take off, primarily because the India-China trade imbalance has been heavily in favor of China. The imbalance is to the tune of about $30 billion US. So China will be looking to see what it can import from India in return for huge investments in the railway sector and in infrastructure, particularly in roads and building airports, which India needs to pep up if it has to attract foreign investments. The other crucial thing is the boundary question, about which today there have been some talks, and there are a whole lot of MOUs to be signed, including China is trying to push nuclear reactors to India, the APC-100 nuclear reactors, during the talks between the President and Prime Minister Modi here. That will be a crucial thing which will come up. Discussions are right now at a very nascent stage. But I guess this is one of the reasons why China is being so keen on this visit, and that is the reason why it's a longish visit too.
So, Mr. Krishna, what is the reaction of the Tibetans that are living in exile in northern India, especially in Dharamsala, to the visit?
They have tried to stage some protests in Delhi and in Gujarat, but they have been unsuccessful so far, because most of the Tibetans in Delhi, for instance, have been taken into custody ahead of Mr. Xi's visit to Delhi. And in Gujarat too, they have been given very, very specified places to protest. But this is nowhere near the path where Xi will take during his stay in Gujarat. So essentially, India is going the extra step to make sure that Tibet does not come in the way, the Tibetans do not come in the way of trying to, mar India-China friendship and relations. And Tibetans themselves are very aware of the fact that India, despite the fact has crushed them and has come down on the protests, has always been a gracious host. There are huge swaths of land in Karnataka, for instance, in the south of India,
yes,
and in the north in Dharamshala and all that, where Tibetans still live very freely, move very freely in India. So
yes,
Tibetans have also taken into consideration that fact.
Yes, Mr. R.K. Krishna, thank you very much for this talk with us.
Pleasure.
So right now with me on set is Tal Heinrich, host of the I-24 news magazine Focus, and this week an inside look at the stories and people of New York.
Yes, exactly.
First of all, Mazel Tov.
Thank you. I wanted to tell you a bit about the concept of our show because, you know, Lucy, when we follow international news, usually we hear about the main headlines coming from each country, right?
Of course.
And on our show, every week we decided to put the focus on a different country and also bringing stories and guests
to put
that
the focus on things that usually we don't look at.
We don't put the spotlight on that get much less attention than the ones that actually grabs the world's headlines.
Why to start with New York?
Well, due to the 9/11 memorial. But so our first guest is a very interesting one. He's a firefighter who actually took part in the recovery and the rescue efforts on that awful day. And he has retired since then, but now he's still volunteering. And another very, very interesting guest that we had on our show is Milton Glaser. He's an 85-year-old graphic designer, and he's the one who invented the famous logo of I Love New York.
Oh, really?
The one with the heart.
With the heart.
Yeah, I love NY. So the other interesting fact about this guy is that he's still working. You know, he's 85-year-old. And hasn't retired. So
wow.
Luke, let's take a look at what he has to say about retirement when asked about this.
You know, I hope you understand that retirement is a conspiracy, that there's no such thing as retirement. It was really institutionalized when there were too many old people in the workforce and generations of young people who couldn't find jobs. And the government said, listen, you know what we should do? We should invent this thing called retirement and get rid of all the old folks and hire the young folks at lower salaries.
And of course, if our viewers want to see the show, it's just right after the news today.
And hear the full story about Milton Glaser and why he had initially to come up with this logo.
So just stay tuned with Tal Heinrich. Mazel Tov.
Thank
you. Great luck. Thank you very much for coming into the studio. And we're from New York to Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv, a startup empire. I-24 News correspondent Ori Shapira took a trip inside the whole high-tech companies in the Mediterranean city that never stops and talked to entrepreneurs about what makes the city an international center for innovation.
The city of Tel Aviv has been acclaimed for its hectic lifestyle, busy nightlife, and long beachfront. But in recent years, it's also become a major magnet for startup companies. This week, the city opened the doors of some of its major technology companies to allow a small glimpse of the trendy tech scene of the White City.
We're inviting people from all over the world to experience this, including also the residents of Israel, to experience the amazing innovation that's happening in the startup nation and in the startup city.
With 1,400 startups, the Tel Aviv area already has a special nickname, the Silicon Wadi.
You walk through the streets of Tel Aviv, you see the same thing. You see the young people, you see the old people, you see everybody has a love for technology, they have a passion for what they're doing and what they're trying to accomplish.
So what defines the Tel Aviv high-tech scene? For one, the collective experience. Two of the high-tech hubs we visited are designed in an open space concept where different companies share space, ideas, and businesses.
We're sharing a beautiful design space where they work on their product, but they have a huge network of people behind them that they can collaborate with, work with, brainstorm with, and wake up in the morning and be happy to meet new people every day.
Others note Israeli chutzpah, boldness that motivates Israeli entrepreneurs to reach their goal despite the obstacles.
I think that because we are living on the edge of the volcano and every day is like a gift, we cannot wait.
Like mushrooms after the rain, startup companies sprout across the nation. Only a few of them can survive the difficult climate provided by a shaky economy, political instability, and hard competition from abroad.
And now to sports. And right now from the Sports Magazine with me on set is Michael Friedman. Good evening.
Good evening.
All good?
It's all great.
Let's talk about Cilic.
Oh, Marin Cilic, big name the last 2 weeks, very exciting. Won the U.S. Open. he went back to his hometown in Bosnia. Now he plays for Croatia, and that's the.
Whoa! This is how they received him.
This is how they received him. They put him on this car, driving through, him standing on top. Everybody's out there. They're so proud of him. They're so happy. They even went to his local church, and the local priest gave him a painting with the tennis star, being depicted with the Virgin Mary. It's absolutely
It's like
beautiful.
the Pope. It's receiving the Pope.
They're so thrilled to have this hero. I mean,
my mom doesn't receive me like that when I come back home.
I mean, after I play a football match, I don't get the same results. No.
Not at all, no. So let's talk about, listen, it's amazing, but actually he did history.
It's very exciting for their people.
It was really surprising and good for him. Good for him. The Pope, the next one. So let's talk about the Champions League.
Yesterday was the opening of the group stage. Big matches, very exciting. Dortmund beat Arsenal, 2-0, which was exciting. Real Madrid destroyed. 5-1 match. It was embarrassing. Atletico, who actually beat Real Madrid last week in the Clásico, ended up losing.
Who are you for?
For me, Chelsea supporter.
Chelsea supporter?
We're playing tonight.
And you're playing tonight?
We're playing tonight.
And what do you think that is going to happen?
They're going to win.
Of course.
Of course. They're my team.
Who they're playing against? Chelsea against?
We're playing Schalke.
Against Schalke?
Schalke. German squad.
German squad.
Nothing.
No, piece of cake, you're
Chelsea
saying.
actually got the easiest group, so for tonight we should have an easy game.
Michael, I will take you on it.
See how it is tomorrow.
Let's see. I will see you tomorrow. Michael Friedman, thank you very much for this. We're going out for a small break, 2 minutes, and then the Daily Debate.